Hello and welcome to the Comic Spoilers Podcast, episode number 2 from Comic Hero Talk. This is the comic book podcast where we talk all comics, including spoilers. Please enjoy. Hey, what's going on? Jacob Bartley here. Welcome to the Comic Spoilers Talk podcast. This is my personal podcast where I talk all comic books, obviously only the stuff that I'm reading, but we talk spoilers on this podcast, hence the title of the podcast, and I get into extreme depth on all the comics that I talk about. Just to give you an idea what you're going to be getting into, I talk mostly Marvel, DC comics. I will read a couple other side comics from, smaller distributors. In particular, right now I'm reading the Power Rangers run, and I'm behind because I just started reading it, so I'm going to review the Zero issue. And I've also read the Power Rangers Pink. I reviewed that earlier on my channel. You can go check that out. But once I finish the Power Rangers issues 0 through 3, I'll review the Power Rangers Pink in spoilers because I never got to do that on the regular Comic Hero Talk podcast. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself and this YouTube channel and this podcast. For those of you who are listening for the first time, I'm Jacob Bartley. Like I said, I am a movie podcaster and now a comic book podcaster. I created this Comic Hero Talk YouTube channel to get into comics and review them and to review TV shows because I have a movie YouTube channel called Apocalypse Movies, and we can only talk about movies on that YouTube channel. And I didn't want to cross over TV with that and make things confusing, so I primarily started this because I wanted to review shows like The Flash and Arrow and Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, and Jessica Jones and Daredevil, Luke Cage, and all that stuff. I don't watch everything. I don't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Gotham. I might catch up on those and review them in the future, but as of now, I pretty much only watch the CW DC shows and the Netflix Marvel shows. I've been thinking about watching Preacher, but we'll get into that later. And I started reading comic books recently too, so I figured this is my outlet to express my love for superheroes in any medium, whether that's comics, TV, movies, maybe even a little bit of video games. We'll see. But for today, I'm just going to be talking comics, and that's what this podcast is for, is just comics, comic spoiler talk. My Comic Hero Talk podcast is the main podcast, and that's where I talk about movie news, TV news, comics, non-spoilers, and maybe a tiny bit of video games, but it's all non-spoiler, and it's all superhero, movie, and TV related, along with comics. So that's a little bit of background on what this channel is and what this podcast is and who I am. I'm just a young guy who loves superheroes in any format. So today, like I explained on my first podcast, but if you're a new listener, you wouldn't know, today I'm actually going to go into a segment called Comic Book Catch-Up Spoilers Edition, where I review comics that I'm catching up on, that haven't necessarily released this week, but are from the past. They can be from a week ago, they can be from 3 weeks ago, they can be from 2 months ago, they can be from 5 years ago. Any comic books that came out in the past that I have not read yet will go under that segment. And then I'll go into the newer comics that released this past Wednesday. Alright, with that being said, let's jump right into it. So as far as comic book catch-up goes, I'm going to be talking about a little bit of the Mighty Thor #1. Came out a while ago. I think it's on issue number 8 or 9 now. And then I'm going to be talking about Black Panther #2. I think that came out a month ago. I'm not exactly sure. The third one's coming out next week, or this week, I believe. And then I'm going to be talking Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers #0, the 0 issue. And that's from Boom Comics. It's not Marvel or DC, obviously. I'm a huge Power Rangers fan. I grew up, my childhood was Star Wars and Power Rangers and X-Men and Spider-Man. That was my childhood, the things that I loved. So I'm so glad I get to view the Power Rangers in some format, and it's really cool because this comic issue is a lot more serious, and I could take it more seriously than the TV show, which was, I'm not gonna lie, the TV show was cheesy. Anyways, enough with all the blah 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 blah. Let's get into the comics. So why not start with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers #0? So we're in spoilers territory, you've been warned. So this comic is really cool because it doesn't start with the origin of the Power Rangers. It doesn't start before they get their powers. It starts, I don't know how far into it they have their powers, but it picks up like right in the middle of a story where Tommy Oliver, aka the Green Ranger, has just recently, I believe that he just recently got over whatever spell he was under with Rita, the villain, the alien villain of the Power Rangers. And now he's joined the Power Rangers and he's going to their high school and he's trying to fit in with them, but he's still suffering with, being under Rita's control. And as you're reading the comic, you could kind of see what's going on in his head, and you can kind of see what Rita's planning to do with Tommy. She's not done with him yet. She's going to use him as a pawn against the Power Rangers in the future. That's what it looks like they're going to do. And yeah, I really like this because I get to see the characters and the concept that I love in modern day. The Power Rangers have cell phones in this comic book. They did not have cell phones in the TV show, obviously. And you get to see them in class texting each other, and it's really cool. I love the high school environment, the dynamic of the team, and being a teen and also being somewhat of a superhero. And just, it was cool seeing all their little interactions and how each character has a different personality. And they stick pretty true to the original TV show, and they even look like the actors from the original TV show. And this comic does not lack getting into any action either. Halfway through the comic, some type of battle breaks out, and we get to see the Megazords form. I think this is one element that will transition extremely well into movies and live action, is the Megazords. Imagine what you can do with 5 separate Zords that can come together to create one big Zord, and the type of Pacific Rim or Transformer type battles you can have. I think it would look amazing if they can get the special effects right. And one little aspect that I really liked was each time a quote bubble comes up, whatever Ranger's speaking, it's in their color. So I'm never confused who's speaking. Sometimes when I'm reading comics, yes, the bubble trails down to whatever character's speaking, but sometimes you're not looking that far down, and like you're confused who's talking, and you have to look all the way down to where it trails to see who's talking. But this one, at least for the Rangers, their dialogue is in their colors, which is really cool. And speaking of colors, I think the comic looks great. I don't expect it to look dark and gritty. It's very colorful and bright and friendly feeling, if that makes any sense at all. It's very welcoming, and I think that's the right feel for these Power Rangers comics. Especially, it's primarily targeted towards kids and people like me who are going to read it because of nostalgia. Yeah, the Power Rangers being made into a comic book is something that I really do appreciate. It feels like the show, but better and more realistic. So far, I'm loving it. I love the Power Rangers number 0. I really like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Pink. So I'm going to keep reading this. I already have all 4 issues of the Power Rangers, so I'm going to keep reading those, and to be continued as far as Power Rangers comic books go. Now, real quick, I'm just going to kind of skim through the Mighty Thor number 1 and the Black Panther number 2. I really wanted to read the Mighty Thor number 1 because, as of most of you may know, Thor is a woman now. And the original Thor has kind of disappeared. I don't know where he is. Again, I'm on issue number 1. But what's confusing to me is Jane Foster is now Thor. Well, she turns into Thor when she gets the hammer, which I liked this comic, but it was a little bit confusing. And you got to understand that I had not been reading the Marvel comics up until, I think this first issue started when the Marvel comics kicked off their all new, all different Marvel comics. So maybe new readers, when they read it, were as lost as I was. But for me, I don't understand why or how or when Jane Foster became the new Thor. So hopefully that'll be a little bit more clear in the future issues. But a few things that I like is this first comic, at least, is very political driven. The council, I guess, on Asgard is, discussing important issues with other races and other planets and stuff, and it's really cool to see that kind of Star Wars type politics within the Thor world. I think it's something that works really well. Again, no real negatives, just I think they could have been a bit more clearer on a lot of things, but overall I did like it, and I'm gonna pick up the next issue and keep reading it. Moving on to Black Panther number 2. Again, this is one where there's a lot of politics going on, and it's a way different type of politics than that are going on in the Mighty Thor, because you're living on Earth and you're in a kingdom, Wakanda, where the king is a superhero. And that's my favorite dynamic of the Black Panther comics, is that you have this king who has the responsibility of taking care of a nation and has to be more than a superhero. He has to be a public figure and in charge both mentally and physically. And he also is a superhero who defends the galaxy, defends the world. He doesn't only have his own home to worry about. So I really love that. It reminds me a little bit of Aquaman, which I'm also reading the Rebirth story, but very different, very different. And I will continue to read Black Panther. I believe the next issue, number 3, comes out next week. All right, well, that's going to do it for the comic book catch-up segment. Now I'm going to move on to the new issues that released this past Wednesday. And I'm recording this on Monday, June 27th. So this past Wednesday is when these comic books come out. And I'm going to start first with the Civil War II spinoff, Choosing Sides. Now, I wasn't even sure what I was getting into when I picked up this comic. I thought it was going to be more involved with Captain Marvel and Iron Man and which heroes are choosing their sides. But it's a little bit different than that. It's kind of setting that up, but it has 3 different stories in it. It has the Nick Fury story, and it has a character called the Night Thrasher, Dwayne Taylor. I was not familiar with this character until I read this. And then it has the Damage Control storyline. So it's basically showing what these characters are going through in the Civil War, overall Civil War storyline. So let's go back to the first one, Nick Fury. I actually ended up really liking this one because, you know, Nick Fury is a character who, he's not necessarily an A-lister, but people know who he is, and he's just a regular man among gods and kings and superheroes and superpowered beings. And it's really cool to see that he's a super spy. He is the super spy, and he's always kind of getting screwed over by, you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. and the government and everything, and we get to see a little bit of that in this, and it just shows me that Nick Fury is a badass. You do not want to mess with Nick Fury, especially if you're not a superhero. And I love his segment of this Choosing Sides issue because he's partway through it, he kind of gets turned on by some S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and he has to take them out. And he takes a lot of them out. And there's like headshots with guns, and there's blood everywhere. I thought this was awesome. I was thinking like, oh, this would be so cool to see in a movie, but I don't think they would ever make a Nick Fury spin-off movie. But they're talking about making a Black Widow spin-off movie. I think if you have Nick Fury and Hawkeye and maybe Maria Hill in that Black Widow movie, you can create a really cool movie in the Marvel Universe that doesn't involve superpowered beings, and you could show a little bit of that Nick Fury capping people in the dome. I thought that was really cool, and he's not just thoughtlessly killing people. After he's done with his battle, he says, I believe he says to Maria Hill, these guys were traitors. Or it might have been his own thoughts, or he said this to Maria Hill, but he said, these guys were traitors and I had to kill them, so I'm okay with that. So if he's down to kill for the right reasons, and I thought that showed a lot about his character. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the Nick Fury portion of Choosing Sides. Alright, so this next segment of Civil War II Choosing Sides is something I'm really excited to talk about. It was my first introduction to Night Thrasher. I have no prior knowledge of this character at all. I've never even heard of him. I didn't know if he was a new created character or if he's had a long history in Marvel Comics, and I haven't really had time to research him yet. I usually research a character when I first find out who they are, but just haven't done that yet. But maybe that's a good thing. It gives me a clean slate on the character, get to interpret him in my own way without any prior knowledge. And his real name is Dwayne Taylor, and as far as I know, he has some type of technologically advanced suit. He has some type of hoverboard, which he calls a skateboard, but it just looks really cool. I really enjoyed his personality. He's very witty, but in a different way, not like Tony Stark in a more modern, not modern, that's the wrong word, but I don't know, in a younger way. He's more immature and has a younger mind. So I really like the way he's talking to the audience while he's interacting with different characters. He talks about Tony Stark to the reader, but then he talks to Tony Stark like he's cool with Tony Stark, but he kind of thinks Tony Stark is a little bit of an a-hole. And I like that he is not just like, he's not blind to the fact that because people are superheroes doesn't mean they're perfect. He knows Tony Stark can be an a-hole sometimes. And he also interacts with Captain Marvel. I love the Captain Marvel cameo in this comic book. First of all, I've been reading her current issue, and obviously the Civil War II issue, and I'm falling in love with the Captain Marvel character. She's becoming one of my favorite superheroes, and I love seeing her pop up in this. And you see his interactions with Tony Stark and his opinion on Tony Stark and how he already kind of doesn't like him. And then you see him interact with Captain Marvel and how he has a little bit of a history with her and they get along really well. I feel like, and they are planting the seeds for which side he's going to end up on. And I think they did that with Nick Fury too, because real quick, going back to the Nick Fury comic book, or the Nick Fury issue of Choosing Sides, the reason why the conflict arises in his portion is because of Ulysses, the Inhuman who can predict the future, had something to do with that, and I think it would land him on Iron Man's side, I believe, the way the issue went. I'll have to go back and read it. But anyways, going into Night Thrasher, Dwayne Taylor, you can, unless they flip it on us, you can kind of tell that he's going to end up on Captain Marvel's side, and you can kind of see why. So I really enjoyed his portion of this Choosing Sides comic because I didn't know the character. I really like him so far, and I enjoy his attitude and his personality and his relationship with the superheroes that we got to see him interact with. All right, moving on to the third segment of Choosing Sides, and that is the damage control. This is probably my least favorite of the three stories, but I still kind of liked it. It's kind of cool to see regular people in the Marvel Universe and what they do. And for those of you who don't know who Damage Control is, they're an organization or a group who clean up after the superheroes who make the messes from saving the world. They believe that the superheroes do enough in saving the world and the galaxy and our lives ultimately. So there should be someone to clean up the buildings, clean up the mess, all the damage. And I love that concept and that element of the whole Damage Control story. Yeah, it's weird because they're an organization and they're struggling to stay in business, so there's some reality to it too. It's really cool. And you get introduced to this character called Troll the Unhuman, Troll the Unhuman, and he's a construction truck who's alive. That's so weird. It's weird, but it worked because at first he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you guys," and then you realize he's causing a whole bunch of damage during the night when the crew isn't working, and you find out that he's just trying to turn these other construction trucks that aren't alive. He's trying to build a family, and then it kind of it's hokey, it's a little cheesy, but it's a little bit emotional, and it kind of tugs at you a little bit. But then it ends up being the motivation for him to join the Damage Control and help them out, and he's very valuable to them because he can do work without a human operating him. He can work at night. So I thought that was really clever and cool, and it's whatever. It's a talking truck, but it works kind of. So I don't know. And just the idea of the Damage Control is awesome. I don't know, like if there was a Damage Control solo issue, I wouldn't read it necessarily just because I'm reading so many comics and they cost money, guys. But if they continue these three stories in this somehow in some capacity, then I'll definitely keep reading all three of them if they come together. All right, well, moving on from Civil War #2 on to some DC comics, and we're going to start with The Flash #1. Now, this is the #1 issue coming from the Rebirth line. And if you listen to my last I don't think I reviewed it on my last podcast, but I did talk about it on Comic Hero Talk. The Flash was one of my favorite rebirths. So they did all the rebirth issues for each character, and they're basically the 0 issues for this new run. And the Flash and the Aquaman were my two favorites. And I really liked the Flash because it tied in with the direct story of the Rebirth, what's going on with the Watchmen and all that, and Speed Force and Wally West, and there was a lot of emotional connectivity there. With that being said, the Flash #1 is might have been my least favorite of the #1 issues. It's not bad, but here's a few things that I just was unsure about. They started the issue with the origin again, going into his origin a little bit. And while I understand not everyone knows the Flash origin, they could have spent maybe just one little part on it. They spent a little too long on the origin again. It's like, for me, it's like seeing the Batman or the Spider-Man origin in a movie. We don't need to see it again. But then again, maybe new readers have no idea what his origin is, so I understand that. I can let that go. So, I'm going to jump to the end of this comic book before I get into any more details, what I liked about the rest of it. But there's this character named August, and I liked his dynamic between him and Barry, but there's a hint towards the end that he might be coming to Speedster too. Now, the thing that makes a superhero special and a power special is that character or that being is the only entity out there with that power. Like Aquaman, of course, like Mira and the other Atlanteans have the similar powers, but among the Justice League, Aquaman, and among the superheroes, Aquaman is the only character who can manipulate water and communicate with animals. And just like Superman, he's the only character who can, obviously there's Supergirl and all the other Supermans, but anyways, maybe this is proving my point even more so, that they're making too many of the same type of characters. If there's 8 Speedsters running around in the DC universe, then that makes the Flash Barry Allen less and less significant. Each Speedster that you introduce makes Barry Allen less special, because now there's more of them. Cool, they have 2 Wally Wests, and then not to mention the villains, Reverse Flash and Zoom, and then there's a female Flash, I don't know in this current run, and now you have August, who's potentially a Speedster. I just wish, I'm cool with Wally West being a Speedster, but I wish they would end it at that. 2 Speedsters, that's it. But hey, this is the comics, and they like to do whatever they want. But other than that, it's not a bad issue at all. It's actually, it continues the same things I liked about the first one. Its connectivity to the Rebirth storyline, and I really actually liked the August character and his relationship with Barry. I thought it was really cool. I almost thought he was going to die at the end, but we actually got a hint towards him maybe becoming a Speedster. And we actually get to spend time with the second Wally West in this comic book. They lightly touch on him in the DC Universe Rebirth issue, where Wally West, the original Wally West, talks about him and says that he's a distant relative of his somehow, and their great-great-grandfather was named Wally, and they were both named after him. And obviously, somewhere down the line, the younger Wally West's parents were African Americans somehow. So, overall, didn't love it, but I liked it, and I'm definitely going to continue to read Flash just because it's important to the overall storyline. Alright, moving on to another DC comic, and that is Aquaman #1. I just finished reading this last night. I believe it was last night. Yeah, last night. And I really liked the Aquaman Rebirth, and I actually really liked this Aquaman #1, not as much as the Rebirth, but I did like it a lot. Again, it continues my favorite thing about Aquaman, which is the conflict with him being half human and half Atlantean. He is split and torn by these two sides. The land doesn't like him because he's Atlantean. The Atlanteans don't like him because he's human, but yet he's their king, so they have to honor him. And that struggling conflict and how he forgives those people who don't like him and wants to protect both sides, all of Earth, is a great dynamic. I think he's a great selfless character, and I think Aquaman overall is one of my favorite DC characters. But one thing I don't know if I like or not, I don't like it so far, is the Mantis character. I believe that's his name, the villain, the black suit and the weird head. I know he wants revenge on Aquaman because Aquaman had something to do with his father's death, but every time this character has shown up in these past two issues, I just don't care about him. I feel like he's whining, and he's really that driven by his father's death. I don't know. He just has a hate on for Aquaman, and I don't know. Maybe there's some history with the character that I don't know that would make me like him more, but I just don't really like the character. But anyways, this issue starts off where the Atlanteans are holding an event for land livers to come visit. It's called the Spindrift. It's like a facility. It's a place of access where the two worlds can meet, where the Atlanteans and the humans can meet and interact and maybe even discuss political issues and stuff. And it's totally Aquaman and his supporters trying to bridge the land and the Atlanteans together, and I love that he's trying to do that. And he actually has a facility that kind of goes with that, is connected to the ocean and the land, and he's inviting the press, and I really like that, and I thought that was really clever and cool. I was digging this comic. They introduced a really cool character. I really liked him, Sark, and he's interacting with this character named Joanna Stubbs, I believe, and she's part of the Royal Navy, the British Navy, and these two characters, Sark, he's an Atlantean, and Joanna Stubbs, a human military woman, are interacting, and I felt the chemistry pouring off of the page. I really liked it. I was like, yes, I hope these two characters are main characters, or at least important side characters in the Aquaman comic going forward. Then what do? They kill Sark. I really like this character, and then Mantis freaking kills him. Maybe that's why I don't like Mantis. But anyways, I don't know how to feel about that. It's not a negative because they made a great character that I enjoyed so far. Then they kill him. So I don't know. Overall, I'm definitely going to keep reading Aquaman. I'm digging it, just the themes and the conflicts and the character. So look out for my next review of the next issue. Alright, we're going to wrap this up with my last review of a DC comic, and that is Wonder Woman #1. I literally just read this before I started this podcast. Now again, the Wonder Woman Rebirth wasn't my favorite of the rebirths, but I still was very intrigued by it. I'm very into the Wonder Woman character. I want to know as much as possible about her and read everything about her. I love the character. I love the idea of her and how she is the most iconic female superhero of all time. And I'm so looking forward to the Wonder Woman film that comes out next year, starring Gal Gadot. I know Gal Gadot is not a great actress, but I thought she held her own in Batman v Superman. I'm really looking forward to that. Has nothing to do with this comic other than it's an adaptation of the character. But anyways, let's get into Wonder Woman #1. First of all, I just want to say, being a guy and being attracted to Wonder Woman aside, she looks amazing. She looks incredibly drawn. She looks like a badass, and she looks so iconic. She looks just as iconic as Superman to me. Like, I love the look of this character, and she looks so intimidating too. She's big, and there's something in this comic that displays how tall she is. She's like 6'3". She's freaking huge. She's taller than me. I would be looking up to her if I met her. But I just think the look of her is amazing, and I think she needs to look big and intimidating because she's Wonder Woman. She's freaking awesome. And yeah, this continues from the Wonder Woman Rebirth, where she's confused on her origin. They're playing on the idea that there's been two Wonder Woman origins. There's been the one where she's made out of clay, and there's been the ones that involve actual parents. And she can't remember where she really came from, and she doesn't know what's going on. She's kind of on her own in this series so far, and just a drifter, and just trying to figure out what's going on with her origin and why she can't remember clearly. One thing that I liked about this comic book is we got to see Steve Trevor, and that's her love interest, who is just a military man. And this is my first time seeing him in the comics. I saw the character in the Justice League War cartoon movie, which I actually really liked. And I believe that was him, right? The one who's running around with Wonder Woman? Let me know if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that was him. But I think his existence is so important to Wonder Woman because, first of all, it humanizes her. She, as far as I know, she loves this guy, he loves her, and bringing him into her storyline does two things. First of all, it gives Wonder Woman a romance, and it humanizes her. Even if they're not romantically involved, they care about each other, and it's somebody that's not Amazonian and someone who's not a superhero that she cares about, and I love that dynamic. And also, it adds a military war aspect to the Wonder Woman story. Going back to what they can possibly do in the movie universe, yeah, you're going to have Wonder Woman and her Amazonians and that aspect, and they might be worried that men might not be into that. I'm into that. But what you can do to make this movie more appealing to a broader audience is incorporate Steve Trevor and his military aspect of it all. And I think that's a way you can make this movie universally loved by everyone. And the same thing with the comics. You see Wonder Woman doing her thing, dealing with mythological stuff, and then you can see Steve Trevor doing real life war tactic stuff, and I think that's really cool. And so far, you don't get much of him, but so far I really like the character. So Wonder Woman's kind of traveling in this jungle. She's looking for this queen. And I don't even know who this character is, but we find out at the end that it's Barbara Ann, and she's a cheetah of some type. And I don't know why Wonder Woman needs her. Oh yeah, she says, I can't find Themyscira. And Themyscira is the home of the Amazonians. It's Wonder Woman's home island, I believe. And she can't find it. So again, she's confused. She doesn't know where her origin. She's confused about her origin. She doesn't know where Themyscira is. She doesn't know where any of the Amazonians are. And I think once things become a bit more clearer, I'll start enjoying these issues a lot more. But I'm still in no matter what. Like I said, I love the Wonder Woman character, and I want to know as much as possible about her, so I'm going to keep reading this. It keeps it a mystery. You don't know exactly what route they're going to go and how she's going to come about figuring out her origin and all that and her past. But also, I was a little upset because the last issue left off not really knowing anything about that, and they kind of end this issue not really giving us any information other than she can't even find Themyscira. The one thing I got from this comic is just how badass Wonder Woman is. There's these beast creatures they work for the cheetah queen or whatever she's called, and about at least a dozen of them attack Wonder Woman. And these are strong. They look like strong beast creatures. They look like kind of werewolves or bats mixed. There's probably a name for them, and you comic book historians know exactly what they are. Forgive me for not knowing what they are. Again, remember, I am not a comic book expert. I will never claim to be, and I probably never will be, but I love reading comic books, so I think that's all I need to talk about them. But yeah, she takes out all of these guys and kills them all. And I don't know if she kills them, but she takes them all out, and it just shows how badass she is. She warns them too. She's like, I'm going to give you 3 warnings. By my 3rd warning, if you don't stand down, you're going to lose. I'm going to beat your ass. So again, displaying how badass Wonder Woman is. Alright, that's going to do it for my comic book reviews. I'm just going to close this thing out here, and just want to talk a little bit, and I just want to remind everyone that comics are a beautiful thing, and they're a way for our minds and our creativity as humans to express ourselves, and we don't get to live in a world where there's superpower beings and all these mystical, magical elements in life. And I think it's very important to, fulfill the need to notice or experience some type of existence like that. And I think that's what comic books do, movies do, TV shows do, and that's why I love the superhero world, because I can't live in those worlds in real life. And when I read a comic or I watch a TV show or I watch a movie, I'm thrown into that world and I'm experiencing it firsthand, and it really lets me escape from, the troubles of reality. Not that there's much troubles, but I'm just, I'm just saying, like, I think comics are a beautiful thing, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. And also, stop the war between Marvel and DC. There's no war. There shouldn't be a war. As comic book fans, as superhero fans, we should come together and we should love both sides and not choose to love one side and hate the other side just because it is who it is. If you don't like the Marvel characters, you don't like the DC characters, fine. If you genuinely don't like them. But if you're just hating to hate and causing hate and posting stuff online, creating more hate, you're stupid. So please don't do that. Let's all join together as superhero fans and comic book fans and just love the content for what it is and celebrate it, please. Alright, that's going to do it for Comic Spoilers Talk, episode number 2. Again, I am Jacob Bartley. You can find me on this YouTube channel, Comic Hero Talk. please subscribe, hit that like button, comment. Let me know how you feel about my podcast. Let me know what you thought of any of these comics that I discussed today. Fill me in on stuff that I don't know about. Again, I'm not a comic book expert. Let me know if I got something wrong, or if I didn't understand something that I might have seen as a negative, that if I had some knowledge on, maybe it'll give me a different perspective on it and make me like it. Please let me know. I would really appreciate that. You can also find me on the YouTube channel titled Apocalypse Movies. That's Apocalypse with an X and exclamation point at the end. And you can check out apocalypsemovies.com, where we put up some great articles daily, so please check that out. And you can also find me personally on Twitter at @JacobBartley_. Well, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. Until next time, you all take care.